you know what it feels like to sit by the window every evening, waiting for footsteps that never come? To press your ear against silence, praying to hear the sound of voices you once lived for? That's my life now. My neighbors think I stare out of habit, but they don't know the truth. I'm not watching the street for the sunset. I'm watching for my children, the very children I sacrificed my youth for, the ones who promised me I would never be alone. And yet, here I am. I wasn't always like this. Once, I was strong. I was fire and steel, working with my bare hands to keep my family alive. My body still carries the scars, burns from the stove where I cooked meals out of scraps, blisters from scrubbing other people's laundry, bruises from carrying baskets of fruit to sell in the market. Every scar has a story, and every story begins with love. Love for the children who now have no time for me. Sometimes I whisper their names into the dark. David. Clara. To me, they are still the little ones who used to curl up against my chest, breathing softly as they dreamed. They are still the children who clung to my skirts, who begged for one more story before sleep. But the world has hardened them, or maybe I was blind and didn't see who they were becoming. All I know is that somewhere along the way, the bond I thought unbreakable was broken. And I cannot stop wondering, was it my fault? Did my silence create this distance? Because I hold a secret I buried long before they were born, a truth I thought I had erased from history. But secrets are stubborn things. They linger, they rot, and sometimes they find their way into the blood of those you love, even if you never speak them aloud. The night it all began still burns in my memory. I was standing in my kitchen, boiling tea leaves in the old kettle, when I heard the knock at the door. My heart leapt, thinking perhaps, after all these lonely weeks, one of my children had finally come. I wiped my hands quickly on my apron and rushed to open it. But it wasn't them. It was a stranger, a young man holding an envelope with my name written on it. His eyes were kind, but there was a weight in his voice when he said, "This belongs to you. My father asked me to return it." He placed the envelope in my hands and left before I could ask a single question. Inside was a letter. Not just any letter, but one written decades ago in handwriting I thought I'd never see again. My chest tightened as I unfolded it, and with trembling hands I read the first line, "To the woman I could never forget." My knees buckled. I had buried this part of my life so deep I thought no one could reach it. Yet here it was, staring back at me, dragging me into a past I swore I'd never reveal. And as I read the words, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If my children ever discover the truth inside this letter, they will never forgive me. My hands shook as I folded the letter closed. The words inside clawed at me like ghosts, demanding to be heard. But I couldn't bear to read them all at once. Instead, I placed it on the table and sat staring at it, as if the paper itself might burst into flames and free me from the truth it carried. You see, my children don't know the whole story of who I was before I became mama. To them, I was always the steady hands, the tired but smiling face, the woman who made miracles from nothing. But before all of that, I was simply a girl named Maria, young, foolish, full of dreams I couldn't afford to keep. I grew up in poverty. My parents were workers who barely made enough to keep food on the table. I learned young that survival wasn't a gift. It was earned with blistered hands and endless sacrifice. At 16, I left school to help support my family. I scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and mended clothes for neighbors. Every coin I earned disappeared into debts and groceries. Still, I told myself, this is temporary. One day, things will be better. And then I met him, The man who wrote that letter, his name was Samuel. He wasn't like the other boys in town, where they were hardened and cruel. He was gentle, with eyes that saw me not as a servant, but as someone worth listening to. He spoke of cities far away, of possibilities beyond our narrow streets. He told me I deserved more than scrubbing floors, that I could have a life filled with laughter and love. I believed him. For a brief moment, I tasted happiness. We would meet in the evenings by the river, and he would play his guitar while I rested my head against his shoulder. He promised me we would run away together, start fresh in a place where no one knew us. I clung to those promises as if they were oxygen, because for the first time in my life, I felt seen. But promises can be as fragile as paper, easily torn by reality. When I discovered I was carrying his child, everything changed. I told him, my voice trembling but hopeful, expecting him to hold me tighter, to reassure me. Instead, his face turned pale. He stammered excuses, spoke of obligations, of dreams too big to be weighed down by a family. And then, just like that, he was gone. I was 18, unmarried, and pregnant in a world that showed no mercy to women like me. My parents were furious, ashamed. My neighbors whispered. I had no husband, no money, and no future. Desperation drove me to choices I still wake up crying about. That child, my first child, I could not keep. With shaking hands and a heart that screamed, I placed my baby into the arms of strangers who promised they would love him the way I could not. I told myself it was mercy, that he deserved a better life than hunger and disgrace. But the moment they walked away with him, my soul cracked in a way it has never healed. I buried that chapter of my life, locking it away behind smiles and silence. When I later met the man who became my husband, I told him nothing. He saw me as a hard-working woman, honest and loyal. We built a home together, we had David and Clara, and for a time, I convinced myself the past was gone. But the past never truly dies. It waits in shadows, patient and cruel, until the day it decides to return. And now, with this letter in my hands, Samuel's ghost has found me again. I pressed the paper against my chest and whispered to the empty room, "Why now? Why after all these years?" Outside, the street was quiet, but in my heart storms raged. What if David or Clara discovered this? Would they look at me and see the mother who sacrificed everything for them, or the girl who abandoned her first child? The truth could destroy whatever love remains between us, but secrets, too, can rot love from the inside. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread before me, staring at Samuel's words, daring myself to read them all. And just as dawn crept through the window, I forced myself to continue. The words cut deeper than any blade. I never stopped thinking of you. I never stopped wondering about the child. If this letter finds you, know that I regret everything. And if he ever comes searching, tell him the truth. The letter slipped from my fingers. My heart pounded in my chest because in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The child I gave away might still be alive, and he might be looking for me. For days after the letter returned to me, I lived like a thief, hiding from my own shadow. I tucked it away inside the drawer of my nightstand, beneath old scarves and forgotten trinkets. But even there it seemed to breathe, whispering its truth into the silence of my house. Every time I walked past that drawer, I felt as though Samuel's ghost was reaching through the wood, pointing at me, accusing me of being both coward and liar. And yet, how could I tell my children? How could I sit across from David, who still visits only when it is convenient, or Clara, who calls me once a month out of duty, and confess that before either of them existed, I bore another child and let him go? They already treat me as though I am fragile glass, a burden too heavy for their lives. If they knew this secret, would they even bother pretending anymore? The loneliness inside me nudged sharper than ever. I found myself talking to the walls, to the air, to the ghost of my mistakes. I replayed that day when I gave up my first son 1,000 times in my mind, his tiny fingers clutching mine, the weight of him in my arms, the way my tears soaked his blanket as I whispered, "Forgive me." That moment has lived in the marrow of my bones all these years. One evening, Clara came by unexpectedly. I had not cleaned up properly. The letter lay half buried under a stack of unpaid bills on the table. I felt my heart leap into my throat when she stepped into the kitchen, her sharp eyes scanning everything. Clara has always been the observant one, the one who notices when a picture frame is slightly crooked or when a lie hides behind a smile. "Mama," she said, brushing her hair from her face, "you look distracted. Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, pressing the stack of papers down with my hand as casually as I could. "I'm fine, child, just tired, that's all. Old bones don't rest as they used to." But she didn't believe me. I saw it in her frown, in the way she tilted her head as though listening for what I didn't say. She reached for the papers, and for a split second, panic flooded me. My hand shot out, grabbing hers harder than I intended. She blinked at me, startled. "Leave it," I snapped, and instantly hated myself for the sharpness in my tone. I saw the hurt flicker in her eyes, that familiar wound between us reopening. Clara pulled her hand back slowly. "Fine," she said coolly. "If you don't want me to see, I won't." She turned away, but I felt the distance between us widen like a canyon. I wanted to call her back, to beg her to sit down so I could tell her everything, but fear sealed my lips shut. After she left, I sat in the silence of the kitchen and wept. My secret was already poisoning the bond between us, and I hadn't even spoken it aloud. That night, as I lay in bed, a thought tormented me. What if he really is searching? What if he finds Clara or David first? What if they discover the truth from him instead of me? I tossed and turned, remembering the words Samuel had written, "If he ever comes searching, tell him the truth." But what is the truth, really? That I was young and weak? That I chose survival over love? That the child I gave away has lived a lifetime without me, perhaps with parents who never let him know he was not their own? The questions gnawed at me until dawn, and as the first light crept into the room, I made a decision I never thought I'd. If he was out there, I had to find him before the truth tore everything apart. But I was unprepared for the storm this decision would unleash, because sometimes digging into the past doesn't heal old wounds. Sometimes it rips them open so wide they bleed into the present. And I had no idea that the search for my lost son would drag David and Clara into a web of anger and betrayal so deep it would threaten to destroy what little remained of our family. The morning I decided to search for him, I woke with a strange energy in my chest, the kind I hadn't felt in years. It was not joy, not quite hope, but a stubborn fire that told me I could not keep living in shadows. If Samuel's words were true, if my firstborn was still alive, then perhaps I owed him, and myself, the chance to face what I had buried. But where does an old woman even begin? I had no records, no photographs, nothing but fading memories of that rainy afternoon when I pressed him into another woman's arms. I only remembered her name, Margaret. She and her husband had promised to care for him, to give him what I could not. After that day, I forced myself to erase the details, as though forgetting might heal the wound. But now forgetting felt like betrayal. I found myself digging through old boxes in the attic, coughing from the dust of decades. Letters, receipts, photographs, fragments of my life scattered in yellowing paper. My fingers trembled as I uncovered a folded slip of paper with Margaret's handwriting. An address. Long ago, I had hidden it away, telling myself I would never look again. But now, it was my only map back to the truth. That afternoon, I walked to the library, my knees aching with every step, and asked the young woman at the desk if she could help me search the address. She tapped at her computer, eyes squinting at the screen, then frowned. That house was torn down years ago. A new family lives there now. My heart sank, but I forced a smile, thanked her, and walked out. On the way home, my thoughts spiraled. What if he's gone? What if I'm already too late? When I returned, David was waiting outside my house. He leaned against his car, arms crossed, that same stern expression he inherited from his father. "Where were you, Mama?" he asked as soon as I approached. I hesitated, clutching the strap of my bag. "I went to the library." He frowned. "The library? You've barely left this house in months. Now, suddenly you're wandering around town by yourself? Clara called me. She's worried. She said you've been hiding something." The way he looked at me made my stomach twist. David has always been the practical one, the son who believes in order and reason, who despises secrets. If he knew what I carried in my drawer upstairs, I feared the disappointment in his eyes would turn to something worse, hatred. "I'm not hiding anything," I said, but the words sounded brittle, like glass ready to shatter. He stepped closer. "Mama, you raised us to believe in honesty. If something's wrong, you need to tell us. Don't shut us out." His voice softened, but I could feel his suspicion tightening around me like a noose. I wanted to tell him everything right then, about Samuel, about the baby, about the letter that had shaken my world apart. But fear locked my tongue. I couldn't bear to see him look at me like a stranger. So I lied. "I'm just tired, David. That's all. Please, don't worry." He studied me for a long time, then finally nodded, though I knew he didn't believe me. As he walked back to his car, I caught the faintest whisper he muttered under his breath. "She's not telling me something." That night, I sat with the letter again. The words blurred from my tears. If he ever comes searching, tell him the truth. But what if the truth destroys everything I still have? I decided then, if I was to continue this search, I had to do it alone. David and Clara could not know until I had answers. Only when I stood face to face with my firstborn could I decide what to reveal and what to keep buried forever. But secrets have a way of slipping through cracks, and while I was planning my search, my children were already planning their own questions, because sometimes silence is louder than confession, and soon they would start digging, whether I was ready or not. The days blurred into one another, but inside me, the urgency grew sharper, like a thorn pressing deeper into flesh. I could not rest until I uncovered something about the child I had lost. Every morning, I sat at the kitchen table with Samuel's letter spread before me, tracing the ink as though the curves of his handwriting might reveal a hidden path. My tea grew cold, my food untouched. I lived on memory and regret. But I was not alone in my restlessness. Clara called again, her voice taut with suspicion. "Mama, are you sure you're all right? David told me you've been acting strange. He thinks you're hiding something." I forced a laugh, brittle as cracked porcelain. "Your brother worries too much. You both do. Let your old mother have her secrets, huh?" Her silence on the other end was heavy. "Secrets destroy families, Mama," she said quietly, and before I could answer, she hung up. Her words echoed in my ears all night. Secrets destroy families. Did she somehow know? Could children sense the weight of a mother's hidden sins, even if they didn't know the details? The next morning, I gathered my courage and visited the church at the edge of town. The priest there, Father Elias, had known me since I was a girl. His hair was whiter now, his back bent, but his eyes still carried the same gentleness. I asked him carefully, "Father, do you remember Margaret, the woman who lived near the river many years ago?" He studied me, and for a moment I feared he would ask why. But instead he nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember. A kind woman, though she moved away long ago. Some said she went north to live with her sister after her husband passed." My heart skipped. North. A clue. I pressed further. "And the boy? Her son?" Father Elias's gaze grew heavy. He folded his hands, choosing his words carefully. "He grew into a fine young man. Smart, but restless. I heard he left town in his 20s. Beyond that, I do not know." I thanked him, my knees trembling as I rose. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite the fire inside me. My son had lived. He had grown. He had walked the same streets I once walked. He had breathed the same air, perhaps even passed me on the road without knowing who I was. That night, as I scribbled notes on scraps of paper, names, places, half-remembered details, the sound of my front door opening startled me. David stepped inside without knocking, his face dark with worry and frustration. "Mama, what are you doing?" he demanded, eyes falling on the scattered papers. I froze. My heart thundered in my chest. "Nothing," I stammered, trying to cover the notes with my hand. But David was not a boy anymore. He was a grown man, taller, stronger, with a sharpness in his gaze that cut straight through me. He reached over and pulled the papers from under my hand. "What is this?" he asked. His eyes darted over the scribbles. Margaret's name, arrows pointing north, fragments of memory. I saw the moment realization flickered in his mind. He looked at me, his voice trembling. "Mama, who is this? What are you hiding from us?" The room tilted. My secret, the one I had carried like a stone in my chest for decades, was dangling on the edge of my tongue. I wanted to tell him, to beg for forgiveness, but the words caught in my throat. "David, please, not yet." But David's face hardened. He shoved the papers back on the table. "If you won't tell me the truth, I'll find it myself." He stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. I sank into my chair, burying my face in my hands. The fear that had haunted me for years was no longer a distant shadow. It was here, alive, breathing in my house. My children were digging into my past, and I could feel the ground crumbling beneath us all. And deep down, a terrifying thought clawed at me. What if they find him before I do? The silence in my house after David slammed the door was deafening. I sat there, staring at the scattered papers on the table, the ink smudged from my trembling hands. For years, I had convinced myself that my secret was buried deep enough that no one would ever touch it. But now, my own son was digging, and each step he took threatened to unearth the truth I feared most. The next morning, I tried to go about my routines, brewing tea, watering the faded flowers on the windowsill, folding laundry that didn't really need folding, but my mind raced. I couldn't shake the image of David's angry face, his voice trembling as he said, "I'll find it myself." And then came Clara. She arrived unannounced, stepping into my kitchen with that same sharpness in her eyes, carrying a tension I had felt only a few times before, once when she discovered her husband's betrayal, and again at her father's funeral. She sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table. "David told me," she said flatly. He thinks you're hiding something. He showed me the notes. My heart dropped. My children, united in suspicion. Clara leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. Mama, I can forgive many things, but I cannot forgive lies. If there's something we need to know, you tell us now. Tears stung my eyes, but still the words would not come. The weight of decades pressed against my chest. I wanted to shout the truth, to beg for understanding, but fear strangled me. Fear of their judgment. Fear that they would no longer see me as their mother, but as a coward who abandoned her child. Clara, I whispered, please, some things are better left in the past. Her eyes glistened with disappointment, her lips trembling. No, Mama, secrets rot families. I won't let them rot us. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. If you won't tell us, then we'll find out ourselves. And with that, she left, her footsteps sharp, final. That night, alone in my room, I clutched Samuel's letter to my chest, rocking as if I were holding a child again. His words echoed, "If he ever comes searching, tell him the truth." But it was not him who was searching now. It was David. It was Clara, my own children, whom I had raised with every ounce of strength I had. And instead of drawing us closer, this secret was tearing us apart. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, and then I made my decision. If my children were determined to find the truth, then I had to find it first. I could not let them stumble blindly into it, not without hearing the story from my own lips. So I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days, and took the bus north, toward the town Father Elias had mentioned. My body ached with every mile, but my spirit pushed forward. With each turn of the wheels, I told myself, this is my penance. This is the road I should have walked decades ago. When I arrived, I stepped off the bus into a town both familiar and strange. The streets were different, yet the air carried echoes of my youth. I asked around cautiously about Margaret. An old shopkeeper remembered her, remembered the boy she raised. His name surfaced like a whisper carried by fate. Michael. Michael, my lost son. My legs nearly gave out beneath me as I heard it. A name, a piece of him, proof that he was real, that he had lived and breathed and carried on. But then the shopkeeper added words that froze me in place. He comes back sometimes, not often, but I saw him last year. He asked about his mother. My heart slammed against my ribs. He had been here. He was searching too. For me. I walked the streets of that northern town with Michael's name echoing in my head, as if each syllable could summon him from the shadows. Michael, my son, my blood. My hands trembled as I touched the walls of old buildings, wondering if he had brushed past the same stone, if his footsteps had carried him down the same paths. Every corner felt haunted by what might have been. The life we should have shared, the years I had lost. At the small boarding house where I stayed, I could hardly sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the streetlights, replaying the shopkeeper's words. He asked about his mother. My chest ached with longing and terror. He was searching for me, but what would he see if he found me? A weary old woman with nothing to offer but regrets? Would he spit my name like poison, accuse me of throwing him away? The next day, I visited the town clerk's office, my voice shaking as I asked about records from Margaret and her son.
The clerk, a tired man with spectacles perched on his nose, shuffled through files. Finally, he looked up and said, "Michael Carter. That's the name on the adoption papers. No children listed for Margaret after him." Hearing his name attached to those cold official words sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was real. A man with a name, a life, and a story of his own. But before I could ask for more, the clerk shook his head. "I can't release further details. Privacy laws, you understand." He closed the file firmly, shutting the door between me and the answers I so desperately craved. Defeated, I returned to the boarding house and found David waiting for me in the lobby. "David?" His voice low and strained. His eyes burned with both worry and anger. "What are you doing here? Clara called me in tears. She said you've disappeared, that you're hiding something from us. So I followed you." My breath caught. My secret had traveled faster than I had. David stepped closer, his jaw tight. "Who is Michael? I saw the name on your notes. Tell me the truth, Mama. I deserve to know." I opened my mouth, but no words came. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the whole lobby could hear it. David's gaze pierced me, his voice trembling now, not with anger, but with something deeper. Hurt. "Do I even know who you are? All these years, what have you kept from us?" Tears spilled down my cheeks. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. The distance between us, mother and son, felt like a canyon carved by decades of silence. "I will tell you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But not yet. Please, David. Not here. Not like this." His fists clenched, his chest heaving. "You've lied to us our whole lives. Do you realize what that does to a man? To wonder what else his mother has hidden?" He turned away, his voice a bitter whisper. Clara was right. Secrets destroy families. And then he walked out, leaving me trembling in the lobby, strangers staring at the broken woman I had become. That night, I sat alone, clutching Samuel's letter, my tears falling onto the fading ink. The walls of silence I had built for decades were collapsing. My past was no longer just mine. It was seeping into my children's lives, poisoning them. And somewhere, out there, Michael was searching too. The question that tormented me was no longer whether I could find him. It was whether I could face both my families colliding. The child I lost, and the children I raised, and survived the storm when the truth finally shattered everything.
The morning after David left me in that lobby, I woke with eyes swollen from crying. My reflection in the cracked mirror of the boarding house startled me, not just because of the lines of age, but because of the fear etched into every crease. I was a woman haunted not by death, but by the living. My children, all three of them, were alive, and yet the distance between us made it feel as if I had lost them all. I forced myself out of bed and returned to the shopkeeper who had spoken Michael's name. "Do you know where he works? Where he lives?" I asked, desperation shaking my voice. The shopkeeper hesitated, then said, "I believe he runs a garage on the edge of town. But be careful, ma'am. He has a temper." A garage. My heart pounded with a strange mixture of dread and longing. To see him, to finally see him, after decades of silence. Would he recognize something in my face? Would he see his own reflection in my eyes? I made my way there slowly, each step feeling like a march toward judgment. The smell of oil and gasoline filled the air as I approached. I heard the clang of metal, the hum of tools, the sound of a man humming faintly to himself. And then I saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair dark like Samuel's, but streaked with the faint gray of middle age. His face was stern, hardened by years, yet when he turned to wipe the sweat from his brow, I saw a flash of something achingly familiar, my own eyes staring back at me. My knees trembled. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. This was Michael, my son, my blood. But before I could speak, a voice cut through the air. David's voice. Michael? I froze. My heart plummeted. I turned and saw David standing at the edge of the garage, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and the man who had unknowingly been the ghost haunting our family. Michael looked up, frowning. Yeah? That's me. Do I know you? David's chest rose and fell, his voice breaking as he whispered, No, but I think you know her. He turned toward me, his eyes burning with betrayal and sorrow. Michael followed his gaze, his eyes landing on me. He studied me, his brow furrowing, and then he froze. I saw the recognition spark, not in memory, for he had no memory of me, but in the silent language of blood. Something passed between us, raw and unspoken. Who are you? He asked, his voice rough. My throat closed, my lips trembled. Decades of silence clawed at me, demanding to be broken. My voice cracked. I am your mother. The words rang in the air, heavy as thunder. Michael's face drained of color. David staggered back, as if I had struck him. The world around me blurred, the sound of tools and machines fading into silence. Michael's face hardened. My mother? No, my mother died years ago. Tears streamed down my face. She raised you, yes, but I gave birth to you, and I have carried the weight of that day every moment since. Michael's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. You abandoned me. The word cut through me like a knife. David's face twisted with rage and disbelief, his voice cracking. God, Mama, how could you? I collapsed into a chair in the corner of the garage, my body trembling, my heart shattering as the two men stood before me. One son who had known me all his life, now seeing me as a stranger, and another who had never known me at all, now seeing me as nothing but betrayal. In that moment, I understood that the truth had not just arrived, it had exploded, scattering the fragile pieces of my family across the floor like broken glass. And now, in the wreckage, I had only one chance left, one chance to speak the words that could either heal or destroy us forever.
The silence inside that garage was unbearable. The only sound was the faint ticking of cooling engines, like the heartbeat of time itself pressing against us. Michael stood with fists clenched, his chest heaving. David paced like a caged lion, his hands raking through his hair. And I sat hunched and trembling, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. For years, I had dreaded this moment. For years, I thought I could avoid it. And yet here it was, roaring in my face. I didn't abandon you, I whispered, my voice shaking. I was forced. Samuel's family, they tore you from my arms before I could even hold you properly. They said a poor girl like me could never raise you. They told me it was best. And I believed them. I was weak. God, forgive me. I believed them. Michael's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with rage. Best for who? Not for me. Do you have any idea what it was like? To grow up feeling unwanted? To lie awake wondering why I wasn't enough for my own mother? His voice cracked, and for a brief moment, I saw not a man but the little boy inside him, wounded, desperate, crying for a mother who never came. Tears streamed down my face. I thought of you every day, every birthday, every holiday, every quiet night. I whispered your name in prayers, begging God to let you be happy, to let you be loved. I gave Clara and David everything I could, but even in their laughter, I felt your absence like a missing limb. I've never stopped loving you, Michael. Never. David stopped pacing, his face pale and stricken. So it's true. My whole life, Mama, you were carrying this. You lied to us. You smiled at our birthdays, but you were crying inside for someone else. Do you know how that feels? To wonder if we were just replacements? I shook my head violently, reaching for his hand, but he flinched. No, David, you and Clara were my heart, my everything. But love is not a pie that runs out when shared. My love for Michael never diminished my love for you. It only made me ache deeper because my heart was torn in two. For a long, heavy moment, none of us spoke. The air was thick with pain, regret, and words too heavy to hold. Then Michael whispered, almost to himself, "All those years, I thought I wasn't wanted, that I was disposable." His eyes filled with tears he fought to hide. But now I see, maybe you were just as broken as I was. I crawled forward on weak knees, ignoring the dirt, ignoring my pride. I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. His palm was calloused, rough from years of labor, but in that touch I felt the spark of a bond too deep for time to erase. "Forgive me," I whispered, "both of you. I cannot rewrite the past. I cannot give back the years, but I beg you, don't let my sins steal your future. Don't let secrets and silence poison what love still remains." David's eyes brimmed with tears. He sank down beside me, his shoulders shaking. "Mama, all I ever wanted was the truth, and now that I have it, it hurts. But I see you. I see the woman who carried all this pain just to protect us, and I don't hate you. I can't." Michael's voice was raw. "I don't know if I can forgive. Not yet. But maybe I can try." And in that garage, with the smell of oil and dust clinging to the air, my two sons stood on either side of me, one from the life I lived, the other from the life I lost. For the first time, we were all together. Broken, yes, but together. I lifted my head, tears blurring my vision, and spoke the only truth I had left. Family is not defined by perfection. It is defined by love. Love strong enough to survive mistakes, betrayals, even years of silence. Hold your families close. Speak your truths before it's too late. Because nothing is heavier than the words you never said, and nothing is lonelier than the love you kept locked away. And with those words I wept, not with despair, but with release. For after a lifetime of silence, I had finally told my story.